MSW Media.
The rule of law is not just some lawyer's turn of phrase. It is the very foundation of our democracy. The essence of the rule of law is that like cases are treated alike. That there not be one rule for Democrats and another for Republicans, one rule for the powerful, another for the powerless, one rule for the rich and another for the poor, or different rules depending upon one's race or ethnicity. To serve as Attorney General at this critical time is a calling I am honored and eager to answer.
So now it's clean up on aisle 45 time. And for a long while yet, it is going to be clean up on aisle 45.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 190 of Clean Up on Aisle 45. It's Wednesday, September 11th, 2024. I'm Allison Gill.
And I'm Pete Struck. We're recording this episode September the 9th, so by the time you hear this, the debate will be over, and we'll talk about it on this weekend's bonus episode for patrons. But today, we're going to speak to the owner of the firm that Donald Trump and his messengers are trying to tie to Judge Merchan, along with Merchan postponing Trump's sentencing in the election interference hush money case until the end of November.
Yes, and Judge Merchan has also postponed his ruling on whether some of the evidence in the case is subject to presidential immunity, and Donald's failed attempt to remove the entire case to federal court. We're also going to talk about the indictment of Dimitri Simes, who we both know from back in the Mueller days. We're going to talk about Tenet Media and the indictment from the Department of Justice against two Russian operatives that were tied to that media company. We're going to talk about Mayor Eric Adams in New York City, and we'll talk a little bit about the E. Jean Carroll 2 case, because that is in appeals court right now. But first, let us thank our new patrons to the show. Thank you very much, Rick Pierre, Maureen, Kendra Sands, D.L. Cobley-Evans, and Sylvia Lang. You make this show possible. Thank you for supporting independent media. You can become a patron by going to patreon.com/aisle45pod. That's AISLE45POD. All right, let's welcome today the founder of Authentic, which is a digital strategy firm. His business partner, Lauren Merchan, is the daughter of the judge overseeing Donald Trump's fraud case in New York City. He is a former senior advisor to Kamala Harris and one of the founders of White Dudes for Harris. Please welcome Mike Nellis. Hey, Mike, how are you?
Good. How's it going?
That's going great. Thank you so much for talking to us today. We've been following what's going on with Authentic behind the scenes now for a little bit, and we wanted to have you come on and talk about where we're at, where we've been, and where we're going. So tell us a little bit about Authentic and when this all started, because this isn't new. This has been going on for over a year.
Yeah, this is almost 2 years of our lives now. This has been going on. So to answer your first question, Authentic is a digital fundraising and marketing firm for Democratic campaigns and progressive causes. We've worked with a lot of really great Democratic politicians. We worked with a lot of great nonprofits. Really proud of the work that we've done. We've been around for about 7 years now. Throughout my career, I've helped raise over $1 billion in low-dollar grassroots contributions. As you mentioned, I worked for then Senator Kamala Harris for about 5 years, basically from her attorney general race until she joined the Biden administration, and haven't worked for her since then, just been focused on building the firm. But about a year and a half ago, the MAGA world started pretty aggressively coming after our firm, particularly targeting my business partner, Loren, simply because she is the daughter of Judge Merchan in the Trump trial, in the fraud case in New York, where he was found guilty now of 34 cases. So this has been going on for the last year and a half, where just an overwhelming series of the only little bit of thread that's even remotely true, right, is that she is in fact his daughter, right? That part is true. But then they've slowly picked apart every aspect of Loren's life, every aspect of my life, every aspect of the firm's trail and FEC reports to try to prove some connection that doesn't exist, that we're profiteering off of the trial, that we're involved in it. All kinds of baseless accusations. We've largely tried to ignore it up until about a month and a half ago, when the House Judiciary Committee, led by the Republicans and Jim Jordan, decided that they were going to open up an investigation and start to harass us.
Oh, my goodness. And basically, I think it was a year and a half ago When Donald Trump and Trump's lawyers initially filed this motion for recusal of Judge Merchan because his daughter worked at Authentic, and Judge Merchan took that to the Judiciary Ethics Board for New York State. The Ethics Board reviewed it, said there's no reason for recusal here, and made that call. It was like kind of done and over. And he's brought it up a second and a third time, both being refuted. And his third time was based on the fact that we, quote unquote, switched candidates from President Joe Biden to Kamala Harris. And the judge saw through it. He was basically like, look, this is the same set of incorrect facts, just with a new candidate attached to them.
Right.
And had turned him down for that. And this, of course, is all going on while he's also trying to have it removed to federal court, and he's filing for immunity, and he wants everything vacated. We'll talk about that later in the show. But you brought up Jim Jordan. And obviously, we don't have any direct evidence that Trump called him up himself and said, start investigating these guys. But that's generally how things go in this administration. All of these, investigations into the Biden crime family and impeachment of Mayorkas, that's all kind of orchestrated by Donald Trump, who's very close to Jim Jordan. Talk a little bit about what Jim Jordan is asking for, how you're responding to it, as far as what you're allowed to reveal.
Yeah, well, let me say this up front. Like, I tend to view it this way, right? Like, there is a criminal proceeding that has been ongoing in the state of New York, between the state of New York and Donald Trump. Doesn't have anything to do with me. Doesn't have anything to do with my business. The fact that there's a familial relationship here is completely irrelevant to all of it. And what's clear to me is they feel like there is political danger in this, and that's up to them to decide if there's political danger or not. But in order to distract from that, they're using the power of their office to do this. So, and I've posted all of this publicly, like people can find it on my Twitter account if you want to go look it up, or any of my other social sites. But about a month ago, we got a letter from Jim Jordan and asked for a bunch of stuff, and a lot of stuff that, by the way, doesn't exist. What's very clear to me is they care more about the PR and political implications of this than they do about the actual legislative aspect of their jobs. And so what's incredible to me is they sent us the first letter, and the way I saw it was not in my inbox. It was there. I just hadn't gotten there yet. I saw it on Twitter because they had leaked it to right-wing Twitter. Right. And they had posted some sort of crazy tweet. I think the second time they did it in all caps on the House Judiciary Twitter account. So very clearly a MAGA world attempt at ginning up controversy and not an attempt at legislating. And so to me, it feels very much like a new form of McCarthyism, not an attempt to actually solve a problem. It's very clear that they're just taking what essentially is a right-wing conspiracy theory that's been spooled, over the course of the last year and a half by some of the craziest people on Twitter.com or X, depending upon, I guess, who you want to talk to.
It's Twitter, right. Here where we live.
Yeah, look, it's like the wild, wild west of the internet with Elon Musk in charge, right? So the whole thing's just very, very silly and a complete waste of time.
Yeah, I want to ask you a little bit about the right-wing stuff on Twitter and some of the Russian disinformation things going on. But I do want to ask you a little bit, I'm reminded, as you're talking about all of this stuff coming at once, I don't think most people understand the totality of what comes at you at the same time. I'm thinking about Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman and some of the Smartmatic employees. It's not just a letter from Jim Jordan. You're getting attacked online. You're getting attacked by political figures. You're getting attacked by right-wing folks on social media. All of this requiring you to, protect yourself physically, hire attorneys. Can you talk about sort of the totality of that experience? Because I think if people think, oh, he just had to go get an attorney, it's well, that's true, but that's just a tiny part of what it's like to go through it, I think.
Yeah. Well, political intimidation is the way that MAGA world works. It's the way that Donald Trump works. And if you look at the history of his career, which you all have documented, I think, greatly over the last several years, it is, he's a bully. At the end of the day, he's a bully, and he's going to destroy anyone that he thinks is even remotely in his path. And frankly, I have nothing to do with this. Loren has nothing to do with this. Our business has nothing to do with this. But we're tangentially eighth degree related to something. And so they felt like there was a good political argument to go after. But right-wing Twitter in particular, but certainly the right-wing community in general is absolutely crazy. So I'll talk about a few of the things that we've had to go through here. The first and most pressing one is going to be death threats. My business partner, Loren, has faced several death threats, some of which have been deemed credible by law enforcement. She's had to leave her house. We've talked about that in our communication with the House Judiciary Committee. I faced less death threats, but I have gotten some. I got a particularly scary one that mentioned my son a few months ago, which forced me to sort of call the local police department and put that on file. We've both invested money on security. We've invested money in legal fees. We've invested money in like anti-doxing to try to like keep ourselves safe and stuff like that. So it comes with a lot. And like for me personally, this is, a little bit personal to get into it, but like I've spent a lot of the last couple of years working on my mental health, my physical health. For those that don't know me, like I'm a pretty big guy. I weigh about 400 pounds now, but I used to weigh 600 pounds. And I dealt with suicidal ideation and anxiety and depression. And at the bottom of the COVID pandemic, I nearly killed myself. Like I came really close, I think, to at least doing something that would have been very harmful for me. And I've been very open about my journey dealing with that. And what MAGA World has done is tried to use that journey against me. They want to go out there and they're out there claiming that at any given moment, I'm going to hurt myself. They're claiming that I've been posting all of this stuff because I'm trying to distract from, something criminal that I've done, which isn't true. And they just make stuff up. And so what MAGA World is really good at is they take like a little thread of something that might be true, right? Which is, to me, creating a little corner of the internet where I talk about my mental health and give men in particular a place and someone to go, hey, I can ask for help. I can get help. There is another side to something like that. And by the way, like this is really important to me. It's one of the reasons I started the White Dudes group is white men are 4 times more likely to commit suicide than any other group in the United States because they don't feel comfortable talking about it. And part of the reason they don't feel comfortable talking about it is because there's all these groups, particularly on the right, who will make fun of you for asking for help. And that's sort of what's happening right now. And so you get, if you were to open up my Twitter feed right now, I'm sure if I open it right now, I would have a ton of tweets from people that are like, this guy's fat, this guy's gay, this guy's going to kill himself, this guy, blah, blah, blah. And like, it's all really silly and it doesn't really affect me personally day to day. Like they often will do things like, I think like after the second Jim Jordan letter, there was a great tweet from one of these people that was like, I just know Mike Nellis is like sitting at home right now thinking about ending it all because he's worried about Jim Jordan sending him a subpoena. And I was literally at a Green Day concert and I hadn't looked at Twitter in like 5 hours here in Chicago. And so it's just they've created this whole world for themselves and like it doesn't really impact me mentally. But what I know it's doing is it's making it harder for other people to ask for help. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
no,
it does. And
it's personally happened to me as well, where they use, I've been talking about rape in the military and my experience with that forever. And they always consistently come at me with their death threats and their messages about how no one would rape you or you deserved it or, et cetera. They use that little bit against you. And I am familiar with that. And I know that in other ways, Pete is also familiar with personal online harassment and threats and attacks ever since, the beginning of time since we talked about, on the Mueller investigation and Pete's involvement there. So I'm familiar with that. And I'm sorry that you've gone through that. And also thank you for your bravery to talk about mental health issues, especially for men. Thank you.
And I'm sorry that you had to go through that too. Like, I can't imagine, how hard it was to speak up about that and then knowing that all these people are going to just keep throwing it back at you. Like E. Jean Carroll, right? Like Trump this week was just like that. She wouldn't have been the one that I chose. And like, that's just a horrible thing to say. And like, my biggest frustration with Trump and Vance and all these MAGA guys is I'm so tired of them as role models. Like, I don't want my son to like see these as an example of what leadership and masculinity looks like. Cause these guys they're nothing.
That's why Tim Walz is so great. He's a great example.
Tim Walz.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. Right. No, and the cruelty is the point. I mean, you look across the board, Laura Loomer's can't think of a more abysmal person online and the way she threatens people. And then, the Tim Pools and the Benny Johnson. I do want to, because you're a very savvy sort of social media presence and expert. When you look at some of those folks, when you look at the Benny Johnsons in particular, and also Tim Pool, how do you explain or how do you think about the overlap when you look at the indictment that DOJ unsealed last week that was saying, hey, in essence, Russia was putting almost $10 million into Tenet Media, and that was finding its way at, $100,000 an episode into some of these very people. How do you think about that? Do you think they knew? Do you think they were just, useful idiots? Or how do you think about that interplay between the indictment and the charges brought against Russia versus these sort of hateful, extreme right-wing folks online?
Yeah, I mean, the challenge to me is very similar to the Trump campaign challenge, right? Like, I'm willing to believe that they were stupid enough to accidentally get themselves caught up in something they shouldn't have been, but I'm also willing to believe they were devious enough to sort of like take it while knowing, right? I think about that Don Jr. meeting about Hillary Clinton dirt in 2016, which like is one of those like ongoing things I'd like more clarity about, and I know probably will never get anything like that. I feel the same way about like
too dumb to crime. They called him just too dumb to crime.
I don't think that's a defense. I don't think that'll work in a court of law, but I'm not a lawyer. I mean, look, Tim Pool and Benny Johnson have built incredible, social media companies or presences, however you want to describe them. And like, good for them. If I was being paid $100,000 by the Russian government, and if I had Elon Musk rigging the algorithm for me, I'd probably have millions of followers too. So like, a lot of times on the left, we have to swim against the current, and like nobody wants to like dump a bunch of money in our laps to like help us do content creation. So it becomes incredibly problematic. Where on the right, I think to a certain degree, they're much more savvy about building up their influencers and their marketing outlets. Now, we're maybe better on the messaging front and the community front, which is why you don't have like
the DOJ legal front
and the legal front, hopefully. So, we're not going to take money from the Russian government, but like, it's a lot harder, I think, to build this type of community, and especially like post 2016. I feel like Facebook in particular turned the spigot off for content creators and digital strategists on the left. And Republicans are so willing to race to the bottom for everything that creates a ton of clicks. And because algorithms are set up to boost likes, boost clicks, boost comments, like makes it a lot easier for somebody like Tim Pool to sort of build up their audience. And it's harder to do that if you aren't willing to. And it's a really fine line.
Yeah, no, I agree. One more question before we let you go. I know that this has been, and I also know from personal experience, this can be a huge financial burden. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, and then what your next steps are as you, Mike Nellis, and as Authentic.
Yeah, I mean, it has been a pretty heavy financial burden to sort of take this on. I mean, it costs a lot of money to do the sort of security work that's needed to be done, the anti-doxing work, the legal fees, are ongoing, and it's a lot. And I think we'll be okay. Like, we'll find a way to navigate it, and I think we're smart and savvy enough. And to me, it's important that, and this is sort of the way that we approach it. I know a lot of other folks have sort of been at the center of like a MAGA whirlpool like this. Like, I'm going to keep speaking out about it regardless of what's happening, because what's going on here is to me pure political intimidation, a pure misuse of government power. And like, I'm going to keep calling it out for what it is. Like, these guys last week, they tried to dox me last week. And like, that puts my family at risk. That puts me at risk, puts my business at risk, makes my staff worry that they're going to be next. And so it's not right. And we're going to keep speaking out about it. But yeah, it does come at a heavy toll. Like, look, Authentic works with a lot of, major House races, a lot of major Senate races. We do a lot of really great work for our political clients, for our non-political clients. We're going to keep doing that work. Like, my job right now, probably like more than anything, my job is to make sure that my team can handle and do their work, because that's what's important. And we've got, 50 some odd days until this election, and we need to win this because, Donald Trump spent this weekend talking about jailing his political opponents. And I often joke, I'm probably not on the first list. I'm not on the second list, but I might be on the third. So I don't know. And I worry about, I worry about Laurent. I worry about the rest of our team too. And so I just want to make sure like folks are safe and able to do their jobs, because we're private citizens just trying to get shit done.
Yeah. And it's just so frustrating having to comply with records requests from a man who is going on 800 days of not complying with his records requests and subpoenas from the January 6th committee. The hypocrisy is astounding. So I appreciate all the work that you're doing. And, we've got your back. If you need anything, let us know. Pete, do you have any final questions?
No, just thanks for what you're doing. Can I put you on the spot and prognostications about the House and Senate races and who either keeps or takes over control?
No, I'll try to be careful just because I'm working on some of them. So
fair enough. Well, good luck. Fair answer. I
will tell you though, Allison, what's interesting to me about the Jim Jordan subpoena stuff is that he's literally subpoenaing us, asking for information about fundraising emails related to Trump's crimes. But I can show you fundraising emails of Jim Jordan sending emails to his list, asking people to donate to him because he got subpoenaed, which he didn't comply with. And so the irony is like dripping to me. So it's completely ridiculous.
Yeah. Agreed. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate you appearing today. Tell everybody where they can find and follow you, especially White Dudes for Harris, because it's such a cool group. And I was on that call, and the amount of support amongst the white dudes themselves, but also for everybody else knowing that y'all are, the white dudes. I thought that was very comforting and very awesome to see. So let everybody know where they can find and follow you.
Yeah, you can find and follow me on Twitter, TikTok, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Mike Nellis, MikeNellis. Should be pretty easy to find. A few of them might have the sort of underscore in between if I didn't get my name fast enough. And then on the white dudes, you can find us on most websites. Just dudes for the number 4 Harris. Be careful. There's a few fake ones out there, but like the Twitter account has 130,000 Twitter followers, so it should be easy to find.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Everybody, coming up next, Judge Marchand, who we were just talking about, has postponed Donald Trump's sentencing until after the election, as well as his decision on whether or not some of those pieces of evidence are part of official acts and therefore subject to immunity. He's postponed that beyond the election as well. We'll talk about that in detail after the break. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Hey, welcome back. We have more new patrons to thank, including Kitty Fish, Paul Lally, Nothing, Kate, and Tony Steele. Thank all of you very, very much for your support. Couldn't do it without you. Happy that you're part of the team. And again, thank you so much. So let's stay up in Manhattan and on the Manhattan case, because a lot has happened in the past week. The big news is that Judge Marchand has postponed the September 18th sentencing until after the election, as well as his decision about whether some of the evidence used in the case is subject to presidential immunity, and if it is, whether it's harmless to the outcome of the trial that ended in 34 felony convictions by a trial jury.
Yeah. And as we know, after the Supreme Court decision on immunity came down, Trump filed to vacate this conviction over several pieces of evidence that Donald believes are subject to presidential immunity, even though he had lost that motion before the Supreme Court's ruling and abandoned it on appeal. So you hear us talk a lot about, pretrial motions. They sound crazy, but they're really there as bookmarkers. So when you file a pretrial motion to dismiss, it's a placeholder for future appeals after conviction, but you have to fully resolve those motions first, which Trump failed to do because he didn't appeal Judge Marchand's denial of his motion to dismiss on immunity grounds. Now, the DA, Alvin Bragg, argued that the evidence in question, which is a few tweets and then the testimony of Trump's discussions with Hope Hicks, are private acts. That's what the DA argued. And even if the court thinks they're not, Trump abandoned his appeal. And even if that doesn't matter, the evidence is harmless as a matter of law and wasn't like the nail in the coffin for a guilty verdict, right? The judge said he would rule on that matter by September 16th, with sentencing just 2 days later, leaving that giant 2-day gap for people to file appeals, for Trump to file appeals.
Yeah, and the thing was, though, DA Alvin Bragg didn't oppose postponing the sentencing, essentially, in fact, leaving it up to the court to determine whether the evidence in question is subject to interlocutory appeal, because the Supreme Court did say official acts questions are interlocutory, but didn't say whether questions about official acts evidence is interlocutory.
Yeah. And Pete, you and I figured that the judge might assume it is interlocutory, right? Because he had he made a ruling, and if it was appealed up to the Supreme Court in those 2 days between the ruling and the sentencing, the Supreme Court could weigh in that official acts evidence is interlocutory and either force the judge to vacate a sentencing if that had passed, or to push the sentencing date back themselves. And I think Andrew Weissman rightly pointed out on several shows that he appeared on MSNBC that keeping this out of the hands of the Supreme Court before the election is actually wise. So in an attempt to forego the Supreme Court overturning this decision prior to the election, at least that's how it seems to me, and also in an effort to eliminate any appearance of political election interference, the judge did postpone the sentencing and postponed his ruling on immunity until after the election. The immunity ruling now will come November 17th and the sentencing November 27th. Do I have those date rights? I think I do. We'll get to it in the actual filing in a minute.
Yeah, and so the ruling, and I'm going to read from it directly, is as follows. Trump's attempts to bolster his application by repeating a litany of perceived and unsubstantiated grievances from previous filings that do not merit this court's attention and will not be addressed in this decision. The people, by letter dated August 16, 2024, state that they, quote, defer to the court on the appropriate post-trial schedule that allows adequate time to adjudicate defendant's motion. Nonetheless, the people to assist the court with its determination, identifies several reasons why an adjournment would be appropriate. On August 29, 2024, defendant informed this court by letter that he had filed a second removal notice in the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York, or SDNY. Defendant's motion was denied by Judge Hellerstein, and defendant is currently appealing that decision to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. As a threshold matter, this court finds that, despite the people's stated neutrality, they present concerns in their letter of August 16, 2024, in a manner which seemingly supports defendant's application for an adjournment. The people certainly do not oppose, and a careful reading of their response can fairly be construed as a joinder of the motion.
Okay,
Notably,
so not only is the judge saying that Bragg didn't oppose an adjournment, but he actually brought up several points that support one.
Right. It was not a neutral judge. It's up to you. It was like reading many reasons. Like there are a lot of good reasons for you to defer this as well. So I think, rightly, the judge is saying, look, this isn't just me. The prosecution, you all sort of indicated that this might be the right way to go as well. And so the filing continues. Notably, had defendant been sentenced on July 11, 2024, as originally scheduled, there would, of course, have been no cause for delay. However, on July 1, 2024, the Supreme Court of the United States rendered a historic and intervening decision in Trump v. United States. Relying on that decision, defendant immediately sought leave of this court to file a CPL Section 330.30 motion to set aside the verdict on the instant matter and to dismiss the indictment. In light of the Supreme Court's decision, which this court must interpret and apply as appropriate, this court granted defendant leave to file his motion. Defendant's application to adjourn sentencing until after resolution of his motion was not opposed by the people in their July 2, 2024 letter response. To allow full briefing by both parties, and this court the time necessary to adequately consider the motion, sentencing was rescheduled initially to September 6, 2024. It was then adjourned again to September 18, 2024, following the filing of a third defense motion for this court's recusal. This now means that any adjournment of even 1 week beyond September 18 will bring us within approximately 41 days of the 2024 presidential election.
And so now we're getting to the heart of the matter here, and the ruling continues. This matter is one that stands alone in a unique place in the nation's history, and this court has presided over it since its inception, from arraignment to jury verdict, and a plenitude of motions and other matters in between. Were this court to decide, after careful consideration of the Supreme Court's decision in Trump, that this case should proceed, it will be faced with one of the most critical and difficult decisions a trial court judge faces: the sentencing of a defendant found guilty of crimes by a unanimous jury of his peers. The adjournment request has now been decided in the same way this court has decided every other issue that has arisen since the origination of this case, applying the facts and the law after carefully considering the issues and respective arguments of the parties to ensure that the integrity of the proceeding is protected, justice is served, and the independence of the judiciary kept firmly intact. Trump's CPL 330.30 motion is denied. If it is denied, the law requires the imposition of sentencing following a guilty verdict without unreasonable delay. So he's saying, look, if I find that these things aren't immune, I got to sentence you right away. The public's confidence in the integrity of our judicial system demands a sentencing hearing that is entirely focused on the verdict of the jury and the weighing of aggravating and mitigating factors free from distraction or distortion. The members of this jury serve diligently on the case, and their verdict must be respected and addressed in a manner that is not diluted by the enormity of the upcoming presidential election. Likewise, if one is necessary, the defendant has a right to a sentencing hearing that respects and protects his constitutional rights.
And so Judge Merchant concludes, unfortunately, we are now at a place in time that is fraught with complexities rendering the requirements of a sentencing hearing, should one be necessary, difficult to execute. Thus, in accordance with certain of the grounds submitted by defendant and the reasons for adjournment provided by the people, coupled with the unique time frame this matter currently finds itself in, the decision on the CPL 330.30 motion and the imposition of sentence will be adjourned to avoid any appearance, however unwarranted, that the proceeding has been affected by or seeks to affect the approaching presidential election in which the defendant is a candidate. The court is a fair, impartial, and apolitical institution. Adjourning decision on the motion and sentencing, if such is required, should dispel any suggestion that the court will have issued any decision or imposed sentence either to give an advantage to or create a disadvantage for any political party and or any candidate for any office. Adjournments for sentencing are routinely granted, often several times, in any number of other criminal matters pending in this courthouse, particularly when unopposed, for reasons ranging from personal circumstances to the scheduling needs of the parties involved. Given the unique facts and circumstances of this case, there is no reason why this defendant should be treated any differently than any other. This is not a decision this court makes lightly, but it is the decision which, in this court's view, best advances the interests of justice. Therefore, it is hereby ordered that decision on defendant CPL 330.30 motion to set aside the jury verdict and to dismiss the indictment will be handed down off calendar on November 12, 2024, and it is further ordered that sentencing on this matter, if necessary, is adjourned to November 26, 2024 at 10 a.m., and it is further ordered the defendant's motion to preclude the people from filing a pre-sentencing memorandum is denied. The people's submission, if any, will be filed with the court under seal. So there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay. Well, this all makes sense to me. I mean, you and I spoke at length, even live, when we were in DC, right, at the DC show with Glenn Kirshner, talking about how we thought that Judge Merchan might postpone in the interest of, erring on the side of being conservative, not giving Donald Trump any reason to be able to say that this sentencing came about only to hurt his chances or help his chances, which might also be the case in this election. And like Andrew Weissman said, it also prevents the Supreme Court from weighing in and giving Donald Trump a win ahead of the election. And so I see where he's coming from. I'm disappointed because being that he's a candidate for president of the United States is putting him in special circumstances that other people might not enjoy because they're not running for president. But he did say that we often adjourn sentencing for all sorts of criminal defendants for all sorts of different reasons. This reason notwithstanding, the judge seemed to think was a good one. You want to protect the verdict. You want to protect the sentencing. You don't want it tainted by, Donald Trump coming out and saying this was political persecution. He only did it because he was trying to make money for his daughter at the authentic firm and whatever he could possibly appeal on. And knowing this Supreme Court as well, if the Supreme Court got a case, if he were sentenced and lost the election and the Supreme Court got a case about overturning all of this and getting all of his lawyers' fees paid, and maybe even suing because, he was wrongfully politically persecuted, I could see this Supreme Court agreeing with him on that and possibly overturning the whole enchilada. So this sort of protects the integrity of what the jury did, the verdict that they handed down, and the integrity of the proceeding. As disappointed as I am, because this is special treatment because he's running for president, I think this is probably the best way to go for everybody.
Yeah, and I was upset initially that, yet again, Trump's getting treated differently from everybody else simply by virtue of the fact that he's a political figure and that any other defendant in any of these four different venues that he's been criminally charged in would have proceeded very differently. But, the fact is that, when you peel it back for exactly what you said and what the judge was pointing out, that, look, the prosecution was not exactly neutral in the position that they took, as you pointed out. And, the last thing that anybody needs is, for the Supreme Court may yet intervene and do something, but at least they're doing it after the election. So it's not something that's going to be batted around as some pre-election hot potato that, see, I was immune all along. This is all, complete BS. So, I don't like it, but I do kind of understand it. And then finally, as you pointed out, Allison, the fact that this is not, in fact, unusual, that Judge Merchan said, hey, this happens actually with some frequency, that, whether it's personal convenience or scheduling problems, sort of the deferments of sentencing are not unusual. So it isn't just Trump getting this treatment. It happens in many other places. So a little bit not satisfying that we're not going to know before the election. A little bit perhaps satisfying that really close to Turkey Day we'll have some idea potentially if he is going to be sentenced to any jail.
I think
Rev
said
what are you thankful for? What are you thankful for?
Didn't Rev say on MSNBC, he's like, hey, we bake a lot of turkeys at the end of November. That was pretty good. That was pretty good. Yeah, I was wrong. It wasn't November 17th and November 27th. It was November
12 and 26.
12 and 26. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I tried to do things off the top of my head. I shouldn't. But okay, we'll bring it to you when it happens. But I do really like the fact that the Supreme Court now cannot swoop in and hand Donald Trump a huge win right ahead of the election. I think that was weighing heavily on my mind. I imagine if he appealed after that, Judge Merchan comes in on the 16th and says there's no immunity here in the Supreme Court. He's, puts in an emergency thing, and he either gets that sentencing stayed, or if it doesn't happen in time, it gets reversed and vacated, and we'll hear it next term. I just was really worried about this particular Supreme Court in this particular instance handing him a big victory, which isn't really a victory, but because he was found guilty by a jury, but could be spun as a victory ahead of the election. All right. Speaking about people who are having a hard time spinning victories, we're going to talk about Dimitri Simes and Tenet Media and the DOJ's indictments. But we have to take another quick break, so everybody stick around. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. We have more new patrons to thank. Thank you so much. Heather, let's see. Alward, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Send us a note if we didn't. Carroll Wallingford, Andreas Larsamills, and let's see, Arthuriel Boothnot. Thank you so much. Again, if I've pronounced your name incorrectly, please send me a correction and we will correct it here on the pod. You make this show possible, so the least we can do is pronounce your name right, and I hope I did. But again, if not, let me know. All right, we've covered this a little bit on the bonus episode this past weekend, but let's talk about the Department of Justice's indictment of two Russians who paid upward of $10 million to the founders of Tenet Media in exchange for podcast episodes from Tenet Media's commentators, which include Dave Rubin, Tim Pool, Benny Johnson, etc. So let's talk about this because this is fascinating.
Yeah, it is. And so last week, DOJ revealed indictments of two people, Konstantin Kalashnikov and Elena Afanasieva. They're formally charged with conspiracy to violate the Foreign Agents Registration Act and conspiracy to commit money laundering. Now, this is from the introduction of the indictment. RT, formerly known as Russia Today, is a state-controlled media outlet funded and directed by the government of Russia. After Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, RT was sanctioned, dropped by distributors, and ultimately forced to cease formal operations in the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, and the European Union. In response, RT created, in the words of its editor-in-chief, a, quote, entire empire of covert projects, unquote, which were designed to shape public opinion in Western audiences. One of RT's covert projects, as described herein, is its funding and direction of a Tennessee-based online content creation company, which the indictment calls U.S. Company One. Over at least the past year, RT and its employees, including Konstantin Kalashnikov, a.k.a. Kostya, and Elena Afanasieva, a.k.a. Lena, the defendants, have deployed nearly $10 million, laundered through a network of foreign shell companies, to covertly fund and direct U.S. Company One. U.S. Company One publishes English-language videos on multiple social media channels, including TikTok, Instagram, X, and YouTube. Using multiple fake personas, Afanasieva edited, posted, and directed the posting by U.S. Company One of hundreds of videos. Many of the videos published by U.S. Company One contain commentary on events and issues in the United States, such as immigration, inflation, and other topics related to domestic and foreign policy. While the views expressed in the videos are not uniform, The subject matter and content of the videos are often consistent with the government of Russia's interest in amplifying U.S. domestic divisions in order to weaken U.S. opposition to core government of Russia interests, such as its ongoing war in Ukraine.
And it continues a little bit later here. Since publicly launching in November 2023, U.S. Company One, Tenet Media, which we know as Tenet Media, has posted nearly 2,000 videos that have garnered more than 16 million views on YouTube alone. Tenet Media never disclosed to its viewers that it was funded and directed by RT, nor did Tenet Media or its two founders and principal executives, Founder One and Founder Two, which we know as Lauren Chen and Liam Donovan, they did not register with the Attorney General as agents of a foreign principal as required by law. Now, the two Russians, I'm going to leave their name pronunciations up to you, my friend, because you're the expert. But the two Russians and then Lauren Chen and Liam Donovan also worked together. By the way, Lauren Chen and Liam Donovan are not named in this indictment. We just know it's them. Neither is Tenet Media or Tim Pool or Benny Johnson or Dave Rubin. We just know it's them. Lauren Chen and Liam Donovan also worked together to deceive two U.S. online commentators, Commentator 1 and Commentator 2, who respectively have over 2.4 million and 1.3 million YouTube subscribers. Founder 1 and Founder 2 contracted with Commentator 1 and Commentator 2. That's Lauren Chen and Liam Donovan contracted with Tim Pool, and Commentator 2 is either Benny Johnson or Dave Rubin. They contracted with them to produce videos using Commentator 1 and Commentator's 2 own names and leveraging their existing audiences for license and publication by Tenet Media. The two Russians and Founder 1 and Founder 2 worked together to make U.S. Company One's true source of funding, RT, by the way, secret by falsely portraying to Commentator 1 and Commentator 2 that U.S. Company One was sponsored by a private investor named Edward Gregorian, when in truth and in fact, Gregorian was a fictional persona. And then this sentence stood out to me too, as well as a sentence that you read from the beginning. They say, as set forth below, U.S. Company One is one of RT's covert projects in the United States. And that gave me the chills, right? That's a tip of the iceberg statement right there, because as they said in the beginning, RT had a empire of covert projects designed to shape public opinion in Western audiences. This is just one of their covert projects.
Yeah, and during the press conference announcing this, Merrick Garland made a point of saying that investigation continues. So a couple of things that are weird. One, it clearly does lay out that, in my opinion, there's plenty of evidence that both Lauren Chen and Liam Donovan not only were aware that this money was coming from Russia, but that there's sufficient evidence there to charge them as well. So the question is, are they going to be charged in the future, or have they already been charged, maybe via sealed indictment, and they were approached and flipped? And in flipping, part of what they did was provide all of this information from the Telegram channel or providing financial records. But we don't know at this point. But this is not one of those things that you read and say, oh, okay, I can, it's tied up in a nice little bow in a one small or big box. There's clearly a lot of outside either ongoing stuff or additional things that may have already been done that we just don't know about yet.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, that the owner of Telegram has been arrested. And that a lot of this evidence, by the way, that we got from both the doppelganger affidavit and the DOJ indictment includes France and Germany. So I thought that was interesting. And the indictment also shows that much of the evidence of this comes from Tenet's Discord channel, right? And that tells me the FBI has all the discussions between everyone at Tenet about these operations. This is from the indictment. In their private correspondence while working directly for RT, pursuant to Founder One's written contract, Founder One and Founder Two regularly referred to their sponsor, RT, as the Russians. For example, on May 12th, 2021, Founder Two, Liam Donovan, messaged Founder One, Lauren Chen, on Discord, quote, "So we're billing the Russians for the corporation, right?" And then on May 22nd, Founder One messaged Founder Two on Discord, "Also, the Russians paid, so we're good to bill them for the second month, I guess." Or on June 2nd, Founder One messaged Founder Two on Discord, "Also, I say we bill the Russians for the last month once we're done with the extra op-eds," referring to Founder One's paid opinion articles for RT. And then on January 5th, 2022, Founder Two messaged an acquaintance on a Discord channel about paid leave. Quote, that the Russians had offered to Founder One. So there's all your evidence that Lauren Chen and Liam Donovan knew that they were being paid by the Russians, right?
Yeah, and they're not named. They're not referred to as co-conspirator 1 or 2, but it's just when it's clear, they were taking money from people they believed or knew to be Russians and forwarding it on, who knows whether or not they were the Tim Pools and Benny Johnson say, we had no idea. Well, who knows? We'll find out whether or not that's true, I think, at some point in the future. But it just seems to me that they are, very much in legal jeopardy. And so we'll see what happens coming down the line. And Tim Pool and Benny Johnson have a bunch of weird things going on, right? So Tim Pool immediately rolled over and said, oh, Putin's the devil and I hate him and he can go fuck himself and I'm voluntarily going to cooperate with the FBI. And Benny Johnson quoted some stupid, scripture verse about who can I trust? And Adam Kinzinger retweeted it or who should I fear or something like that. And Kinzinger said the FBI, which I thought was, absolutely.
Yeah. Let me ask you about that, because everything I've, read from the Mueller report on the FBI always has Telegram, WhatsApp, messages, Discord channel messages. They have everything, right? And Tim Pool and Benny Johnson have told all their followers on Twitter and probably other social media platforms as well that the FBI has contacted them and informed them that they are victims of the crime and that they need to come in and talk to the FBI. Now, I actually tend to, if you read the indictment, the Russians and the founders came up with this dossier for this Gregorian guy, right? Eduard Gregorian, and they've put this whole fake dossier together about him and sent this
fake resume like George Papadopoulos of Model UN.
Right. And they sent it over to the commentators, Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, Benny Johnson. And one of them was like, I need more information. I want to talk to this guy. Right. So it seems like there was a little bit of due diligence done on the part of these commentators, or at least one of them, to find out who is funding this. And so they tried to set up a call with the guy. It never went through. And then eventually commentator 2 accepted the $5 million a year and $100,000 signing bonus to do these videos. So my question to you is, do you ever have victims of crimes who end up becoming criminals themselves after they're questioned?
Yeah, I mean, if they sit down and talk to you and lie, for sure they can get charged with that. Now, I don't think this is some folks are saying, oh, this is a pretext, right? That it's all a big setup and it's a trap. The government and DOJ in particular is not going to word you as a victim in an indictment, essentially talk about you that way in a public press conference and have that all. That's not the way. They're not going to set somebody up that way. It just isn't going to happen. But if you go in and you decide you're going to there might be an innocuous explanation of I didn't know, but you choose instead because you actually did know and you decide to start lying up, down, left, and right, and the Bureau has proof to the contrary, you can get charged. But what was interesting, so do I see, based on what we know now, charges coming to Tim Pool or Benny Johnson? I don't. But what was really interesting is that the number of people who squealed like stuck pigs who are not named anywhere in this indictment, like Dan Bongino, the roid rage ex-Secret Service, I don't know that he was an agent, he might have been a uniformed officer, went on his show, whatever it is, and talked about essentially you best shut up and snitches get stitches in as many words, essentially cautioning people to be careful who you're talking to, don't trust anybody, and keep your mouth shut, which is an odd thing to do unprompted. And then a woman by the name of Harmeet Dillon, who is one of the 87,000 attorneys circling Trump world and working around it. She's one of the more credible ones. Apropos of nothing, took to Twitter and just said, hey, look, you don't talk to anybody, get an attorney, which is also a very odd, weird thing or words to that effect on Twitter, which is a weird thing to say out of the blue. So when you see something, again, pointing to Russian disinformation and paying this little segment of Tenet Media and all these other people in and around the Trump legal and sort of social media information space suddenly start screaming about shut up, shut up, shut up, don't talk to anybody, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. And the other thing that's interesting, too, is that it seems like folks like Tim Pool and Benny Johnson are like, hey, we were just doing our shows. We had total creative control. Nobody told us what to say. Nobody told us what to put out. Nobody told us anything. And there's actually a lot of information to the contrary in this indictment. For example, it says, after the public launch of Tenet, Afanasyeeva, that's Lena, used her covert personas, Helena Shudra and Victoria Pesty, aggressively to advance RT's investment in Tenet. She directed Tenet staff to publish specific content that she sent over. And then there's examples. As an example, on March 22nd, 2024, Helen Shudra, that's one of the Russians' pseudonyms, shared in the producer Discord channel a video of the March 22nd, 2024 terrorist attack on a venue in Moscow, which killed about 145 people and injured hundreds more. Producer One privately messaged Founder One, writing, I don't know if you saw it, but they want me to post some footage from an attack in Moscow today. There's a watermark in the middle of the page that's blurred, which looks bad. It's also pretty graphic. You can see people getting shot, albeit from far away. Founder One did not push back on the content of the clip, but replied in the producer Discord channel, quote, I'm not sure if it's a good idea to blur out someone's watermark. And then Helena Shudra assured them, it's fine, no worries, it falls under fair use. You can use it. And Producer One and Producer Two found a video clip of the attack without a watermark and posted it to Twitter, satisfying the Russians' request. Another one, on March 23rd, she, the same Russian, privately messaged Founder One, that's Lauren Chen, on Discord, saying one of our creators can record something about the Moscow terror attack, despite public reporting that the foreign terrorist organization ISIS had claimed responsibility for the attack. The Russian requested that Tenet blame Ukraine and the United States, and they went out and did that. And then, of course, there's the mention of Tucker Carlson, where one of the Russians sent over that video of him in the supermarket in Russia, talking about how wonderful Russia is. And the producers were like, this is a little overt. This is like even too saccharine for us. But they ended
shilling. They used the phrase, this feels like overt shilling.
But they published it anyway. So there, and as they mentioned in the indictment earlier, thousands of videos shared to these content creators from Russia, which they shared on their channels. So when they tell you, oh no, we were doing this on our own, nobody told us to put up at anything, this is the content we would have made anyway, that's not the case. And they have plenty of evidence in the Discord channels to show otherwise. Now, did they know it was coming from Russia? Probably not. I would say probably not. It mirrors, it's certainly pro-Russian stuff, but they took their 100,000 per episode and put it in their content anyway. So they were definitely fed content, a lot of it from Russia.
And they were definitely shills. In my opinion, again, my opinion only, they absolutely had some idea where it was coming from. You don't get this. They're getting $100,000 per weekly episode. So you total that out over 52 weeks, that's over $5 million a year. Not $5 million a year for a full-time job. Not $5 million a year for a part-time 20-hour job. $5 million a year for 1 hour a week. Mm-hmm. Now, maybe you do a little like planning your script and do a little bit on editing. But don't think for a second this is like, oh, well, yeah, that's a lot of money, but, plenty of lawyers, No. Doctors and attorneys work more than an hour a week. Mm-hmm. But be working it's ridiculous. And nobody in the podcast world. I mean, maybe Joe Rogan makes that kind of money. Maybe Rachel Maddow makes that kind of money, but it is not. You are not going to go out, even with an extraordinarily successful podcast, and find somebody dropping $100K per hour-long episode.
No, I did the math on Twitter for everybody to see. When Tim Pool came out and said, I got tons of similar offers for like $100,000 an episode. That's the market rate for an episode. No, the market rate for a podcast that gets between 100,000 and 200,000 downloads or views per week is more around the $2,500 to maybe $7,500 range. And so no. And I did the math with CPM and fill rates and everything that I think I probably know a little bit about podcasting. But no, nowhere close. We're talking 25 to 50 times the amount of money. And if Tim Pool or Benny Johnson or anybody, Dave Rubin, ever suspected that this stuff was coming from Russia and shared that feeling with people in Discord, the FBI has that. And the best thing for Tim Pool and Benny Johnson to do when asked about it is to say, I had my suspicions, but I honestly didn't know. Don't lie to the FBI, guys. Don't. They have all of your communications. I promise. And it's totally feasible for you to have been a useful idiot, completely unaware of where this was coming from, but to have had suspicions and expressed those suspicions to people that you knew. There's nothing illegal about that. So just remember, be honest. They're probably not listening to this show, but it's not a good idea to lie to the FBI.
Yeah, I think they're full of crap. I think they know full well where for people who spend, and again, you got to think the entirety of a large number of their shows are talking about these enormous plots. But I mean, it's like Alex Jones adjacent plots by the nefarious deep state working with old Twitter and U.S. social media companies to manipulate the perception of the sheeple on the left, and to spend, again, the entirety of your 1 hour a week podcast talking about these elaborate conspiracies, but never once possibly think about or consider that you might be in the middle of a pretty straightforward one, that Russia's got a lot of money to throw around and you're saying exactly what they want from a geopolitical standpoint. Maybe you ought to consider that if you're into conspiracy theories, there might be one there. If you're concerned about the amount of money that Hunter Biden might have gotten in and around Burisma dealings or other things in Ukraine, maybe you ought to be concerned about the $9.7 million that Russian propaganda funneled to you to be shills. It is such a logical disconnect that I can't believe they didn't know.
Mm-hmm. So, and what's funny to me is somebody said, yeah, well, you know what? If you didn't know, what that means is that a bunch of Russians sat around a table and said, these guys are so dumb, they'll never figure it out. And that's what they think about you. But that's not the only indictment we got this week. I mean, aside from the other 5 GRU indictments that came down in a cyber attack investigation by the Department of Justice, we had one of our good old friends from the Mueller investigation indicted for a new batch of crimes. Well, tell us about that.
That's right. Dimitri Simes and his wife were indicted. And this is from the Associated Press. Justice Department has charged a Russian-born U.S. citizen and former advisor to Donald Trump's 2016 presidential campaign with working for a sanctioned Russian state television network and laundering the proceeds. Indictments announced Thursday allege that Dimitri Simes and his wife received over $1 million and a personal car and driver in exchange for work they did for Russia's Channel One since June 2022. The network was sanctioned by the U.S. in 2022 over Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Simes, 76, and his wife Anastasia have a home in Huntley, Virginia, and are believed to be in Russia. Quote, these defendants allegedly violated sanctions that were put in place in response to Russia's illegal aggression in Ukraine, said U.S. Attorney Matthew M. Graves in a statement announcing the charges. He continued, such violations harm our national security interests. A fact that Dimitri Simes, with a deep experience he gained in national affairs after fleeing the Soviet Union and becoming a U.S. citizen, should have uniquely appreciated.
It goes on to say from Associated Press that Simes and the Washington think tank he led, CNI, Center for National Interest, figured prominently in Robert Mueller's investigation into Russian interference in 2016 and its potential ties to the Trump campaign. The report chronicles interactions that the Soviet-born Simes, who immigrated to the U.S. in the 70s, had with assorted figures in Trump's orbit, including Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. He was also instrumental in helping write and deliver that speech with Maria Butina that Trump gave at the Mayflower, where Jeff Sessions told Congress that he had no meetings with the Russians.
I've been accused of being a...
I've been a surrogate for that campaign from time to time, but I do not remember any encounters with the Russians. So that's
little Keebler elf.
That's good old stuff. Dimitri Simes. And so here is yet another example of a Russian state-owned media outlet sanctioned by the United States spreading disinformation in the United States with the help of some folks like Dimitri Simes and his wife.
Right. And the question always is when you get something like this, I mean, he's clearly bad now. So when did he go bad? And Dimitri Simes has been a fixture in Washington for decades, in political circles. So as a Russia expert and Russian foreign policy, he isn't one of these knuckleheads who rolled into, the Rob Goldstones who suddenly, appear out of ignominy in the middle of the 2015-2016 Trump campaign. He has been around in Washington. And so the question in my mind right now, particularly given all the stuff he was doing, brokering the introduction of Kislyak and Sessions, all the back and forth and shenanigans he was doing with Kushner and others. He's bad now. When did he first go bad? He, and it doesn't mean plenty of people, it's not some black or white thing that he's either working for us or he's working for them. In most cases, in my experience, people are working all the angles they can. It's not a pure ideological thing. It's like, I'll, do a favor for you here and I'll do a favor for the other side. But it certainly makes me wonder, yet again, do we really know everything that he was doing going back to 2015 and 2016? Because, he's indicted now.
Well, if anybody knows, I would assume you would. Got anything that you want to say?
No, I got nothing I want to say. I got a lot I want to say.
You're like, makes me wonder when he turned bad. Really?
It makes me wonder when he turned bad. That's what I want to say. It makes me wonder when he went bad.
Okay.
That's all I have to say.
That's all you have to say about that. All right. Well, thank you so much. Glomar. All right. We still have a couple more stories, but we have to take one more quick break. So everybody stick around. We'll be right back.
Hey, welcome back. Our final list of new patrons to thank this week includes Tracy Rains, Alishani Scott, Gemma Cox, Brother Stein, and Under the Bridge Troll in Lower Michigan. Thank you for your support. Thank you for being part of the team. And thank you for letting us get all of this news that you're not going to hear many other places out to you every week. With that, we have a couple more quick stories for you this week. This is from Erica Orden at Politico. Donald Trump came within feet of one of his most prominent accusers, the writer E. Jean Carroll, in a Manhattan courtroom Friday as the two attended oral arguments in the former president's appeal of last year's $5 million jury verdict that found him liable for sexual abuse and defamation. A panel of 3 federal judges from the Second Circuit Court of Appeals appeared skeptical of Trump's bid to overturn the May 2023 verdict that found he sexually abused Carroll in the dressing room of luxury department store Bergdorf Goodman in the mid-1990s, and years later called her claim a hoax. Friday's arguments didn't concern Carroll's own testimony at trial, and instead largely focused on the admissibility of the testimony of another witness, a woman, Jessica Leeds, who claimed Trump groped her on an airplane in 1979, and the so-called Access Hollywood tape, a 2005 recording in which Trump boasts of grabbing women, quote, by the pussy. Now, Trump's lawyer, D. John Sauer, described the case as a, quote, quintessential he said, she said case, and accused Carroll of having a political motive to smear Trump. Sauer argued that testimony from Leeds about the alleged airplane encounter should have been excluded because at the time there was no federal law against sexual assault on an airplane. Kaplan, however, countered that there was a law in place at the time that prohibited, quote, simple assault. It was a crime then to grope someone on a plane. It is a crime today to grope someone on a plane, she told the panel. And Sauer argued that the Access Hollywood tape shouldn't be considered a confession, as Carroll's lawyers described it, because, quote, they don't point to any specific incident that it's a confession of.
Wow.
To which Judge Denny Chen countered, quote, well, it's a confession about a modus operandi. Sauer then said, but modus operandi itself is inadmissible.
So, yeah, we were vague about all the pussy he grabbed. You can't. Okay. Wow.
Yes, this is a hypothetical. God almighty.
Well,
a week, right? Less than a week before presidential debate. And you would think maybe, dear listeners, how many of you are like, I haven't heard about this. This happened last week? Because nobody, other than the few and far between Erica Ordens, are stunningly writing about it. Because I don't know. Media's just given up. Too much, too hard. I don't know.
Yeah. And get this, Pete. The panel that's going to decide the appeal consists of 3 judges appointed by Democratic presidents. Chin and Judge Susan Carney are appointed by Barack Obama, and Judge Myrna Perez was appointed by Joe Biden. After leaving court, Trump returned to his Midtown high-rise to rail against both his civil and criminal cases in New York. During a press conference at Trump Tower, former president repeated his claim that he had, quote, never met Carroll and sought to discredit two of the witnesses in the case who also claimed he sexually assaulted them. Frankly, I know you're going to say it's a terrible thing to say, but it couldn't have happened. It didn't happen. And she wouldn't have been the chosen one. That's what Trump said of Leeds, seeming to imply he would have not been attracted to her after reiterating how famous he was at the time. He said that if I was famous, I was very famous at the time, as she wouldn't have been the chosen one. That, yeah, I would have
for sexual assault.
Else. Right.
To be clear, the chosen one, I choose you to sexually assault.
Yeah. And he also took aim at his team of lawyers who were standing right behind him. During a press conference, he complained they didn't raise arguments during Friday's court appearance related to the trial court judge's decision to block Trump's lawyers from questioning Carroll about a dress she said she kept from the department store incident. I'm disappointed in my legal talent, I'll be honest with you, he said as they stood there. Trump is also appealing the $83.3 million verdict from the second Carroll trial, in which he was found liable for defaming her while he was president about the same mid-90s sexual assault. And honestly, all of this appeal, the $5 million judgment, all of that is the basis for the merits of the $83.3 million judgment. That the judge was basically like, all of this is assumed that he did this and that he is liable for this. You just have to decide the damages pretty much. So that's why this appeal of the first trial, even though it's far less money, is the most important one because it provides all of the merits for the second case.
And in a sane world, it would also be important because all of this is coming up in the context of this man is the Republican nominee for the president of the United States. And you would think Americans would be repulsed, let alone not willing to vote for a person who's talking about who would or wouldn't be the chosen one for someone to sexually assault, their candidate to sexually assault. But you would think, but that's just me crazy talking again. So our final story today is also from the Associated Press. Federal investigators this week seized phones from New York City's police commissioner and at least 4 top deputies to New York Mayor Eric Adams, according to people familiar with the matter. FBI agents, not state folks, FBI agents seized the devices Wednesday from the homes of several high-ranking city officials, said 2 people who spoke on condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to discuss the ongoing investigation. The officials include First Deputy Mayor Sheena Wright, Philip Banks, the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety, his brother David Banks, the city schools chancellor, and Timothy Pearson, mayoral advisor and former high-ranking New York Police Department official. Federal investigators also seized devices from the homes of Police Commissioner Edward Caban, or Cabin, I think it's Caban, one of the people said. The searches add to a flurry of investigative activity around Adams' administration, his campaign, and the first-term Democrat himself. He previously received subpoenas and had his electronics seized in federal inquiries. The NYPD said in a statement that it was aware of and cooperating with an investigation by Manhattan-based federal prosecutors, quote, involving members of service, unquote. The department directed further inquiries to prosecutors who declined to comment, as did an FBI spokesperson. And I should note, as we're taping this, that according to reports online, NYPD Commissioner Edward Caban is expected to resign. Much like, what is it like Bernie Carrick and all these? He's expected to resign his post in the coming days on the heels of news of a federal investigation involving possible corruption. This is from Politico, according to 4 people who are familiar with the matter.
All right, he's stepping aside.
Yeah, we talked about this. I mean, Allison, God, it was like months ago. We were talking about it was foreign influence, right? And the fact that people were looking into Mayor Adams and some trips and potential money or other things of value that he had taken from the government of Turkey and not disclosed. And if I had to guess, the FBI, you open a case on A, and in the case of investigating A, you gather evidence and you may find, things that lead you to
B, C, and D. Yeah.
Right. Crimes B, C, and D. And that, this looks like, you got a can of worms and you went in there looking for a Turkish can of worms. You opened it up and there might have been a couple of Turkish worms, but there were, all this other stuff as well. So look, this is not going to end well for Adams. My projection, my prediction, he's going to end up indicted. I would think that's probably going to happen. Well, I don't know when it's going to happen, probably after the election, but I don't think he escapes charges in all of this.
No, I don't think so either. Y'all could have had Maya Wiley. You could have had Maya Wiley.
Could have. Maya's amazing, and you might yet. You
might yet,
kid. Come on, Maya. Don't put away your running cleats, Maya. You may need to get out there and go again. God Almighty.
Well, that's our show. We want to thank Mike Nellis for popping in and joining us for that interview. Very insightful. And you should follow him on social media as well as White Dudes for Harris. And boy, we had a lot to cover this week, but we got through it. And I don't think it's going to slow down anytime soon, especially with the looming election. And you can join us if you're a patron on the bonus episode this weekend. We're probably going to talk about what we heard and saw in the debate that you have already seen, but we have not yet seen because of the amazing time travel that happens when you record podcast episodes. So anyway, do you have any final thoughts before we get out of here this week?
No, I'm not going to prognosticate on what we're going to have to say about the debate, other than to say that Donald Trump is a complete both moron and jerk. Only I won't use the word jerk on the bonus.
I don't think he'll be able to stop himself from personal attacks, but we'll see. I know that Kamala in her prep has been learning how to poke the bear, as it were. To get him to overreact. So we'll see. We'll see how well she does at that and how well she lays out her policy. I think she'll do an outstanding job. I predict that she'll win this debate probably fairly easily. But I'm going to be watching to see whether or not the moderators fact check him in real time. We already know the pre-served up lies that we've heard in the last 8 million rallies and debates. Should be able to be immediately fact-checked or at least followed up on. And I'll be looking for that unless there's a rule in place, which I haven't heard about, that prevents fact-checking from or the moderators from fact-checking in real time. But it'll be interesting to see how Kamala Harris does it as well.
Yeah, I betting they don't. They're going to leave it up to Kamala, and I think she's ready. I hope they ask about okay, so here's a question for you. My question that I hope gets asked is, did you or your campaign or anybody in your business around you get $10 million from Egypt?
Yeah, that'd be nice to know. As reported by the Washington
Post. That would be nice to know, since no journalist has asked him about that yet. Because why would you want to know that?
Or at least say there's no such thing as postnatal abortions. Or, at least say, sorry, sir, crime is down. Border crossings are down. Just some very simple, basic fact checks.
Immigrants eating cats.
Wonderful.
What the hell is the most recent thing coming out of Illinois or something? Where the locals are saying this never happened. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, the police are like, we have no reports of anybody stealing and or eating pets. But thanks.
So weird. So weird.
Just weird.
So weird.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Pete. We'll see you at the bonus episode this weekend, and we'll see everybody else as well. I hope you have a great week. I've been Allison Gill.
And I'm Pete Struck.
Cleanup on Aisle 45 is written, researched, and produced by Allison Gill, with editing by Molly Hockey. Our art and logo design are by Joelle Reeder and Moxie Design Studios, and our music is composed and performed by Adam Orr. Cleanup on Aisle 45 is a proud member of the MSW Media Network, a collection of creator-owned podcasts dedicated to news, politics, and justice. For more information, visit mswmedia.com. MSW Media.